Honorable Premier Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, who's also the Anguilla representative, ECCB Monetary Council member, Honorable Minister of Home Affairs Kenneth Hodge, Honorable Minister of Sustainability, Innovation and the Environment, Quincy Gums Marie, Honorable Elected Member and Parliamentary Secretary Merrick Richardson, Appointed Ministerial Assistant to the Premier Courtney Morton, Honorable PS Dr. Aidan Harrigan, Chair of the Public Service Commission, Beda Lloyd Richardson, Chair of the Financial Services Commission, Ralph Hodge, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, students, and other well-wishers. We want to welcome you to the 40th anniversary lecture put on by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. It's part of the ongoing lecture series, and we are starting here in Anguilla. This evening, we have a distinguished team of panelists, and they'll be speaking to you on the theme, food security and the blue-green economy in Anguilla. At this time, I would like to invite all to please stand as I welcome to the podium Reverend Wilmot Hodge from the Methodist Church Anguilla Circuit to start us with a word of prayer. Reverend Hodge.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. Creator God, we magnify and praise you for the splendor and order of your creation. Lord, we marvel at your handiwork when we consider the blessings we have as inhabitants of the islands of the sea. Thank you for the gifts of sunshine and rain, seed time and harvest, white sandy shores, crystal clear waters, and the wide and deep blue seas. You have ordered these gifts for our sustenance and for the good of all who occupy this space. Forgive us, Heavenly Father, for the ways in which we have misused and abused the resources of the earth that you have entrusted into our care. Give us wisdom to redeem and restore that which is broken, and help us to repair the breaches with the resources of technology and human collaboration, so that we may live in harmony with all creation and use for our benefit what you have placed in the world for our sustenance and pleasure. Bless now this evening's activity. Bless the moderator and all who will speak. Let every word be uttered with the intent of advocating and finding solutions to the problems that occur in our natural habitat. And may they inspire this generation to work together, harnessing our gifts for the benefit of our island home and the world at large. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please remain standing for the rendition of the national song. This would be via an instrumental piece.
God bless Anguilla, nurture and keep her, noble and beauteous she stands with the sea. O land of the happy, a haven we'll make thee. Our life and love we give unto thee. With heart and souls we build our nation proud, strong and free. We love her, hold her dear to our hearts for eternity. Let truth and right our banner be. We'll march ever on. Let truth and right our banner be. We'll march ever on.
You may be seated. I'm your moderator for this evening's activity. My name is Keith Stone Graves. At this time, we'll hear some brief remarks from the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.J. Antwine.
Hello, Anguilla. Hello, everyone. Greetings from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. I am pleased to greet you this evening as we kick off our lecture series in celebration of our 40th anniversary, a year of reflection, celebration, and implementation. Now, do you know that almost 3 in 5 persons in our region are confronting moderate to severe food insecurity? Do you know that we are larger ocean states than we are island states? And do you know that we pay some of the highest rates for electricity in the world because we are so dependent on fossil fuels? Indeed, about 90% of our energy mix come from fossils. So, I pose these questions to put in context this very lecture this evening on the topic, food security, the blue and green economy. I thank the panelists and presenters who will speak on this important topic. And I want to thank everyone who's made an effort to join this important lecture this evening. I offer my words of thanks to our Premier Webster, the rest of Anguilla, our country manager and team, and all those who have worked to put this lecture together. I hope it will be thought-provoking and stimulating, and that ultimately we will decide to do something to effectively tackle these issues. And so I conclude with my oft-repeated remarks. We cannot change our history, nor can we change our geography, but together we can elevate our development trajectory through innovation and collective action. Thank you. God bless.
Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.J. Antwine. We have a wonderful topic in store for you this evening, and we want maximum participation. It's all about you. We want to hear from you. You'll be hearing the presentations from our panelists on the topic, food security and the blue-green economy in Anguilla. I would like at this time to introduce the members of our esteemed panel, and I will begin by reading brief bios of each candidate. Firstly, we have Miss Kathy Gums. Kathy Gums is the Director of Fisheries and Marine Resources Unit, but tonight she is here in her capacity as a specialist, as a marine biologist, coastal resources management specialist. And all the members of the panel, they're appearing here this evening. I need to make this abundantly clear in their specialist role tonight. Secondly, we have Trenton Roach, a horticulturalist in the Department of Natural Resources, and he's appearing this evening as a crop production specialist. And lastly, Carencia Rouse, Director of Environment within the Department of Natural Resources, and Carencia is appearing this evening as an environmental management specialist. So I'll start with a brief bio of Kathy Gums, who you'll be hearing from firstly. Kathy Gums began her environmental career as a high school intern, working with the Agriculture and Fisheries departments in the late 1990s. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Marine Biology from the University of the Virgin Islands and a Master's of Science in Natural Resources Management Environment, with a concentration on coastal resources management from the University of the West Indies, Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies at Cayville Campus, Barbados. Some of her certifications include formal training and certification in aquaponics from the University of the Virgin Islands, ocean governance, policy, law, and management from the University of Dalhousie, Halifax, Canada, climate change adaptation for small island developing states from the University of Geneva. Kathy is also a certified PADI scuba diver. She has written and collaborated on over 10 scientific articles and many research-oriented project proposals. Kathy currently holds the post of Director, Fisheries and Marine Resources. This role requires her to balance livelihoods and sustainable development of the marine environment. Kathy's leisure time activities are centered on her two vivacious sons. She's also zealous about preserving Anguilla's cultural heritage and plays a major role in Anguilla's annual summer festival and other community events and organizations. That's it for Kathy Gums. Let me just We just acknowledge the presence joining us at this time, the Honorable Minister of Infrastructure, Communications, Utilities, Housing, and Tourism, Hayden Hughes. Let me tell you a bit now about Trenton Roach. Trenton Roach was born in Georgetown, Guyana, to parents June and Trenton Roach Sr. During his early childhood, he was exposed to agriculture, both plants and animals. This is when he discovered his enthusiasm and affection for flora and fauna. Trenton graduated from Richard Ishmael Secondary School in 1991. He then decided to pursue his passion at a higher level when he attended the Guyana School of Agriculture and completed a diploma in agricultural science between the years 1993 to 1995. Hungry and thirsty for expanded knowledge in this subject area, Trenton attended the University of Guyana and completed a Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture Crops Bias, 1996 to 2000. After completing his studies at the University of Guyana, Trenton relocated to Anguilla to join his mother, who worked as a nurse at the Princess Alexandra Hospital. Trenton worked for Ruan's Landscaping from 2000 to 2006, after which he joined the Anguilla Public Service in May of 2006. Trenton currently works at the Department of Natural Resources in Anguilla as a horticulturist. Some of his training over the years include principles of plant quarantine procedures conducted by the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and he's also conducted work for the USDA, AHIS, and he's been involved in the identification of fruit fly of economic importance. He's also done work with insects, virus, and fungi identification, and conducted for FERA United Kingdom September 15th to the 20th, 2019. Trenton loves the challenge of transferring knowledge and information to farmers and backyard producers while enabling them to increase their productive capacity in a sustainable manner. During his downtime, he loves reading the news on Flipboard and staying current with world news and global affairs. He's also a fan of Formula One racing and enjoys attending a few races whenever possible. Trenton Roach. Lastly, we move to Carencia Rouse. Carencia holds a BA honors from Carleton and an MSc from Oxford University. Carencia Rouse is a professional in the field of geography and environmental governance who believes that the gateway to a thriving nation is sustainable use and management of natural resources. Having been named Island Scholar in 2011, Ms. Rouse attended Carleton University, where she read for a degree in environmental studies and a minor in women's and gender studies, and received honors. In 2015, she returned to Anguilla and worked at the Department of Environment as the coordinator of conservation education, submitting to her passion for the natural environment through the practice of conservation and public education. In 2016, Ms. Rouse was awarded the Chevening Scholarship, which afforded her the opportunity to read for Masters of Science in Nature, Society, and Environmental Governance at the University of Oxford. With 7 years of environmental management experience, Ms. Rouse now serves as the Director of Environment within the Department of Natural Resources. Her work focuses on the development, implementation, and monitoring of environmental legislation, policies, strategies, and plans with a view towards the improvement and maintenance of healthy and resilient natural ecosystems. Carencia Rouse. So just a few little house rules for you. These panelists will each be speaking for 8 to 9 minutes. So they'll be speaking for 8 to 9 minutes. I'll advise that you please hold your applause until all the presentations are completed, and then we can give one rousing applause to the panelists. All right? Then after the presentations, the floor will be open. This is the part that we really want you to get involved with. The floor will be open for all your questions. The questions will be channeled through the moderator to the panelists, and then they'll be directed to the panelists. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to call now to make her presentation, Kathy Gumbs, marine biologist, coastal resources management specialist. Kathy Gumbs.
Pleasant good afternoon to all. I'd like to adopt the established protocol, and it's lovely seeing you all in the room this afternoon. When we hear the term blue economy, I'm sure for all of us in the room, different things come to mind. Maybe before you were coming here, if you heard the term blue economy, several things might have come to mind. Some people might have thought on the ocean, the sky, all sorts of different things. A few months ago, I was invited to a discussion right here at LaView, and it was titled The Orange Economy. And when I got the invitation, in my mind, I was like, what in the world is the orange economy? So I had to turn to the internet and do some researching. And then I found that there are so many different color-coded economies now. And so it is all new. The blue economy is fairly new. The terminology, the blue economy itself, is new. However, the blue economy, it is old, very, very old. Somewhere in Psalms, there's reference to merchants going to the sea to trade. Goes that far back. And then when you think on Fisherman's Day and its relevance to St. Peter and St. Paul being fishermen, and of course culturally Anguillians and our affection to the ocean and trade. So we go way far back when you think on the blue economy. And the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank describes the blue economy as something that promotes an economy that promotes the sustainable use of marine resources in a manner that aligns economic growth, improve livelihoods, social equity, and environmental conservation. And it places emphasis on approaches that reduce carbon emissions, reduce pollution, and prevent the loss of biodiversity and habitat. So that is the blue economy. Several people, several agencies and institutions define the blue economy differently, but there are key terms within there, sustainability being the main one, and economic growth and improved livelihoods. At the center of the blue economy, there's sustainability. In utilizing the blue economy, the ocean or water resources for economic gains, there's growth and innovation. And the more you use the blue economy, the more money we can generate. And the more money we generate, we should also be looking at how to maintain these systems and create healthy environments so that we can to grow the blue economy. And that cycle sustainability being the center focus of economic growth within the blue economy. How do we in Anguilla use the blue economy? Just a snapshot. This list is not exhausted in any way, but for social and recreational value, we look at things like boat racing being our national sport, recreation, sea bathing, just to name a few. And then looking at industries, the blue economy directly employs 30% of the population in tourism directly. And then, of course, there are the indirect industries. And 3% of people are directly involved in the fishing industry. There's over 700 properties directly on the coast, dependent on these coastal resources. And for maritime transport, over 80% of our food is imported, and 89.3% of tourism arrivals are via the ferry terminal. We depend on the blue economy for coastal protection, and the ocean is a carbon sink and produces a vast amount of our oxygen. Just a visual of some of the things that we use the blue economy for. How do we use the blue economy for food security? So linking now the blue economy to food security. What is food security? So growing up, let's just give an example. Growing up, my grandmother and my grandfather were fishers and farmers. So they grew and fished for us. And they provided everything that the family needed to survive. It was available because the sea was in the backyard pretty much, growing up on Crocus Hill. And they farmed in the backyard. So my grandparents were able to produce enough food to meet the demands, supply and demand. And then it was stable. There was a stable supply of food, and there was access as well, and equity involved in that domestic arrangement. The food was very nutritious and it was organic. And those are the key concepts of food security: availability, utilization, access, and access. So food security is defined when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preference for an active and healthy life, as defined by the FAO. Like the blue economy, at the center of food security is sustainability. We're looking at availability. This now would be on a national, and it is the same definition as domestic. But now, how do we meet the needs of the people of the nation and not just your household? And this is where government agencies come into play, and priorities of the government comes into play. So availability, how do we meet the supply and demand of the people in Anguilla to ensure that they have access to food? Stability, the consistency, there's a consistent supply of food. And Mr. Roach will talk about resources such as water to ensure the availability of food. Utilization, how are we ensuring that the food that we are producing and giving to our people in Anguilla is nutritious and can sustain healthy livelihoods? And access, how do we ensure that those most vulnerable populations, the elderly and the young people, have access to food? So looking at the availability, stability, and utilization and access on a national level, what is happening in Anguilla, and this is by no means exhausted, it's just a snapshot. Focusing on availability, we have an open fishery of 85,500 square kilometers. Open fishery meaning that if you have an interest in fishing and you want to fish or you need to fish to provide food for your family, there's an open fishery. You can enter the fishery and provide food, create a job for yourself, or create some sort of livelihood around the fishing industry. There's a fisheries development plan which was written by the Department of Fisheries, and within the fisheries development plan, it specifically lays out, there's a roadmap for how the government of Anguilla can move forward with focusing on the fishing industry to create jobs, to develop the fishing industry, create spin-off industries and cottage industries. On the stability, we're looking at the political will, which specifically relates to the government. Luckily, the current administration, there's a strong focus now on food security, and they've been putting lots of things in place to develop the fishing industry, not just for economic gains, but to ensure that the people of Anguilla can feed themselves and create jobs to sustain their families. And there's lots of subsidies for the fishing industry and the agricultural industry, where fishers and farmers can bring in goods duty-free. The Department of Fisheries have been teaching lots of sustainable practices, going out into the community, reaching out to fishers, so we can ensure that their livelihoods are sustainable and we can carry on for generations in the blue economy. Also looking at money management strategies, which again is linked to stability. So not just how you can make money today from the blue economy, but how you can continue to make money from the blue economy. Again, that sustainability being the key. Utilization, there's lots of food and nutrition policies. I think enforcement might be one of the things that is needed. And there's public promotions on eating fish. However, we can do more by reaching out into the public through different means, being more innovative with these promotions on healthy eating and eating local, consuming more fish. There's a lot more that is needed where that is concerned. And access. What is in place to ensure that there's equity in the distribution of food, equity in purchasing food, that there's nobody in Anguilla who is food insecure. One of the projects that is being worked on in the Fisheries and Marine Resources is an aquaponics project. And the idea behind that is to start with some demonstration facilities and then go out into the community to teach people their small systems and easy ways which you can sustain your family with proteins and fruits and vegetables, something that is easy to manage, with a focus on single-parent families as well. Public assistance in school feeding programs. I know that not all of the schools have school feeding programs, but this is another initiative of the government of Anguilla where they are trying to go out into the schools and ensure that there are feeding programs throughout all of the schools. And market access and certification programs. Specifically now, how is Anguilla marketing their fish? How can we get out on the global markets? How can we generate more revenue, not just for the individual fishers, but to get more money spent in the community for economic growth and sustenance of the people of Anguilla? The department is looking at certification for fishers. So there are certain bans now where local fishermen are unable to sell fish overseas, of course, because of different things with standards. But how do we get past that and get our fish sold internationally? Some of the threats to food security are climate change, ocean acidification, and hurricanes. Ocean acidification, directly linked to climate change, is one of great concern, where when the ocean becomes too acidic, it starts to deteriorate calcium carbonate structures, such as coral reefs. And then, of course, coral reefs, there are fish that are dependent on coral reefs and other calcium carbonate structures, animals with calcium carbonate structures, such as conch and lobsters. They are threatened. And once coral reefs are threatened, the fish are threatened, then there's spill-on effect. It comes to us, where our coastal resources are threatened and our livelihoods are threatened. There's no insurance for the fishing industry and no technical nor financial assistance to enter the fisheries. The preference market for hotels and restaurants, and there are no fully functional fish market on the island. There's inconsistency with market and there are issues with markets and storage, and disease, COVID-19, politics, and a lack of innovation. These are all threats to food security. Some solutions to food security, in which this list is not at all exhausted. We need stronger partnerships in training and trade, locally and regionally. There's a need for scientific and technological advancements and the need for digital marketing and sales. We need to keep up with technology. There's younger people on the market now, and we have to see how we can advance the way in which we are selling, the way in which we are publicizing issues such as this, and the sale of nutritious food. How can we get them on board and keep them well informed? And that is true. Digital marketing, being innovative, and understanding how to build sector resilience and getting insurance for the fishing industry. We need more policies that support consumption of local fish and local food. And we need to continue to prioritize local food production. And there's a need for fresh food market and storage facilities. So this is just, I'll leave you with this video. This is cute because there's two little boys who have food at the end of it. So the fisherman, he went out to fish, and the fish was sold. He was able to then take that money and purchase vegetables for his family. However, right here in Anguilla, there are people and little boys and girls who is not afforded that opportunity, who cannot afford to eat fresh, nutritious food. And so these are things that we need to think about. There's more policies that are needed, and I think more work needs to be done in the community to think about those who are less fortunate and those people who are unable to go out and maybe fish for themselves and supply themselves with food, and those children whose parents are unable to provide for them. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Could I adapt the protocol already established? My presentation basically is food security in the green economy. It's also ironic that the green economy is so dependent on the blue economy. Given that Anguilla is so dry, we get our water from desal. So we're basically using the blue economy to produce water for the green economy. And that's why we see all these challenges in the green economy. So there's so much we could do, but there's lots of challenges. And it starts from the way we get our water source. The green economy is often seen as the economy that shows growth while promoting sustainability, development through more efficient use of available resources. And that resource basically we're talking about is our land and our water usage, how we could use them and manage them and make them more sustainable for generations to come. This is also aligned with the concept of sustainability, economic development, environmental protection, social welfare, in particular reducing the reliance on fossil fuel. As Kafi alluded earlier to on the Governor Antoine, our reliance on fossil fuel is just way, way too much and too dependent. And we're selling out most of our financial resources, we're using that to use fossil fuel to produce our electricity, which is not creating any generational wealth for us. So we're just bleeding ourselves if we don't change this particular trend. Food security. The major demand for food has led to animal and plant breeders to develop high-yielding varieties, drought-tolerant cultivars, disease-resistant varieties, superior breed of animals for meat and dairy consumption. All of these tend to draw more of our natural resource, and our scarce natural resource is our water, because high-yielding varieties require more water. So we all boil back down to this most important. As food securities in Anguilla's context, what we have done to improve that, we've used drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is basically using a tubular hose, and the hose has some little emitters that lets the water go directly to the plant root. So you'll be more efficient in managing your water usage with drip irrigation. Plastic culture, that's basically covering the soil with a plastic, and it does two things. It reduces moisture loss, it reduces the influence of weed infestation, which is gonna affect the plant growth. Aquaponics, Kathy said about aquaponics is basically growing fish in a controlled environment to produce food. Greenhouse production, that's basically, it's not new, but we're getting into it more now. But there's a risk in greenhouse production in Anguilla because of our high winds, exposed to hurricanes, not enough insurance for farmers who want to invest in this kind of technology. And then there's microgreens and value-added products. Microgreens is basically sowing seeds in a little container in some agar gel or some other medium, and after it sprouts within 3 to 4 days, you use that sprout as highly nutritious food. It's very more efficient than growing it out long or using much more water. And it's highly valued and nutritious. This is traditional agriculture in Anguilla and what farmers used to do and what they used to produce. So all the farmers in Anguilla were the pioneers of production. Crops grown were yams, peas, potatoes, corn. And if you look at these crops, these old traditional crops grown under rain-fed conditions. That means they weren't a big pull on our water supply. There's a shift in production now where the traditional farmers are going out of production and the younger farmers are coming in. These younger farmers now are doing more of the cash crops, which includes tomatoes, cucumbers, cabbage, cantaloupes. These are the crops now that require much more attention, much more water, a pull in our system that is very scarce. But it's all a way to feed the growing population too. The poultry sector has increased probably over 100% in activity over the past couple of years. Broiler production has also seen an increase. We'll be doing probably between 400 to 500 brooded chicks being imported monthly, and that's to help to feed the nation. So that's a good thing. Diversifying the economy to be less dependent on one thing. It's basically you're making the economy with different angles so you could produce for yourself. So we could do agrotourism, value-added products, greenhouse production, aquaponics, hydroponics, apiculture, and microgreens, as I said earlier. Apiculture is basically production of bees. So you're going to get honey. You could do beeswax. You could do the hydroponics is basically growing plants under water conditions. So what you're trying to do, you're using back the nutrients, using back the water, and you're recircling it. But the thing about that is you're using pumps to recircle that water. That means you're using energy. So it's all how we could do it in a sustainable manner to reduce your energy costs. And the only way you could do that is by getting solar systems, solar pumps, to send that water through the systems. Agrotourism. This is basically any activity on the farm that's going to attract tourists and visitors to the farm. So farmers could produce crops like dragon fruit, where there's going to be a specialty, and the farm could invite visitors when certain procedures on the farms are carried out. This, for example, is pollinating the flowers. It's a special process where you have to go to the male flower, get off the pollen, go to the female flower, and brush it on. So it's a tedious process, but the farm could teach visitors on the farm about this process, and that will actually increase tourism on the farm. Value-added products. This is basically a mini sector by itself where young entrepreneurs can produce products which is excess from farms. And you can produce jams, jellies, sauces, and this can be sold at very high price in a niche market. Products are preserved in a preserved stage, hence it has a higher and longer shelf life as compared to fresh produce. I mean, it could store. So you could, if you produce it in December, you could sell it till next April. Whereas in fresh fruits, if you produce it now, you have to get it to the stores within a certain time before it starts to deteriorate. Because once the fruit is detached from the plant, it starts to deteriorate. But if you could preserve it, you extend the shelf life of it. And you get a higher price for it too. So this is just a picture of some value added. In the picture to the right, this is basically a tomato juice. So using tomato juice, fresh tomato juice, you're reducing the use of sugars in your juice. That's going to help you be more healthy. The last one there is with the cassava flour. This is very good because if you could reduce the use of wheat flour, this is a substitute. And everybody knows about the war in Ukraine last year and the effect it have on cereals and grains to the Caribbean and the world as a whole. If we could use what we have in the Caribbean, produce flour, we wouldn't have to depend on what's going on in the outside world. So we're just trying to find a way to feed ourselves and be sustainable. And we could do it through using the commodities we have, you dry them, and then you grind them and you make your own flour. We just have to learn to substitute to what we have and stop depending on the outside world. Aquaponics, Coffee said a lot about this. Aquaponics is basically growing fish to provide nutritious food for ourselves. The green economy and Anguilla. The need for us to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel has long expired. I said this more than one time. It's long expired. Our continued reliance on fossil fuel will greatly affect our ability to achieve food security. Because as I said earlier, we're just bleeding ourselves. Once we keep using fossil fuel, all of our excess cash is going right back into it. Adopting renewable energy systems can enable us as a people to strive to attain a sustainable future for generations to come. Because if we use renewable energy, we get to save much more money than we used to spend on fossil fuel. And it's ironic that we are talking about greening the economy and all this, but still, every year, the oil-producing nations, they're increasing their oil production. So how could we go getting greener and they're increasing their oil production? There's a cost for that. It's obvious they're getting money for the product because they keep increasing production. And normally, oil prices go up when the demand is high. The supply is never high. Demand always high because the price is always going up. Reducing food loss and be more efficient in utilization of our precious resource, which is our water. And the banks right now, I think NCBA is giving green loans, so they're basically encouraging us as a whole to green our houses, try to use renewable energy, use solar. So that's a good way to start, to having green loans. And at a very low interest rate, that's encouraging. That's a good start. And I find the government of the day they start putting some finance into the economy where we could try to help to feed ourselves. So that's a good thing, and hope it's sustainable, and we could keep going on and build from that. Challenges. Threats by invasive species, never-ending threats. Because we have open borders, hurricanes, you will get invasive species. So we have to do more in our biosecurity at the ports and try to prevent the influx of invasive species, and we have to educate the public not to smuggle. Because people tend to smuggle. Once you see the customs at the post or go to the port, they hide their stuff in their bag. That's not good. Because when something do come, we get a call. I went out this afternoon at South Hill. A lady called with some cactus. When I went there, she had a cactus worm. The cactus is a normal cactus, and who would think of worm eating a cactus? Is a very desert plant. But actually, it's destroying the cactus. So we got to be careful what we smuggle and bring in, because it's going to affect our biodiversity, our flora and fauna. Increased use of lands for other purposes. I'm not bashing any other purpose, but land for agriculture should remain for land for agriculture. Our water quality and availability, that's our sore point. We have a distribution system that needs upgraded. We cannot be producing water and spending thousands of dollars to repair the pipes when the water leaking. Because who pays for it? We ourselves pay for it. The nation pays for it. If you produce 10,000 gallons of water and it costs you $10 and you lose 5 gallons, Guess what? We still got to pay for what they produce, you know. So we got to be more efficient in producing this water, and the distribution have to be better. Because we pay for the production. We don't pay for the distribution, you know. We pay for the production. So what they produce, we pay for. Even if they lose it, we pay for it. So we need to upgrade that system, because you can't produce something of high quality like that without that cost and lose it. So we have to be better with our water distribution system. High buildup of salts in soil due to excess pull on wells in periods of low rainfall. This is very critical, because if you keep pumping from the well, nobody measures the drawdown table, and you start to send salt deposits on the soil, the soil is going to crumble and will be no use for the future. So you have to be careful how much we pull in the dry season. The thing about it, the water department love this, because the brackish water is not as saline as salt water. So they would let the supplement as much as possible. At the same time, when they do that, they send that salt water into the system. So we got to be careful how we do it. It needs to be managed properly. Rising costs of agricultural inputs. This includes feed, fertilizer, and seeds. I like this part. Reason why, the amount of money we spend yearly on feed, fertilizer, and seeds, we can't continue doing this anymore if we want to be self-sufficient and feed ourselves. You spend thousands of dollars on hybrid seeds. Those seeds are planted once. You can't replant those seeds. We just start going back to heirloom varieties where you could replant them all the time and don't keep shelling out money, because when you have one big company like Monsanto producing the fertilizer, producing the seeds, producing all the other inputs, how could you win? You can't win, because you have to keep going back to them all the time. So we have to find creative ways of using the older varieties, older seeds, where we don't have to, and those older seeds, they don't require so much of water, so much of care, they don't even require so much attention. But guess what? We want a nice uniform fruit, almost looking the same. But we pay for that, an extra cost for it. So we need to start going back to the traditional seed varieties, and we will save a lot more money. There's no way we could be, they're only telling you, oh, you're going to be efficient, you're going to be great. No. They're fooling you. All they want you to keep coming back to them all the time. We got to go back to the traditional stuff. Increased use of fertilizer and trace elements. Same thing as I said before. If you got hybrid varieties, they require much more water, much more fertilizer, much more insecticide. These same insecticides pollute the land, run off in the soil, goes down to the waterways, damage our waterways. You're getting dead corals and all that. The next thing what we do, once you do monocropping is like the banana and the planting industry, where you have large fields of one crop. Once you get a large field of one crop, the pests love this. This is breakfast. All the food is right here. Why should I go? If I could come in here and I see all of this food, what do? Make my children multiply. Let's go. So when you do that, you have to go and get chemicals to spray them. These same chemicals are going to end up back in our food. So monocropping is always difficult to do, because once you do it, you increase your pest presence. And once you increase your pest presence, you use a lot more insecticide to control them. That's the end of it. Thank you. I never know, get too quick, get to the end too fast.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to adopt the protocol that's already been established, and thank you for having me this evening. When we talk about Anguilla, we usually have two key selling points: our natural features and our people. We say things like Anguilla is blessed to have 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone to support seafaring livelihoods and a high-end tourism industry that accounts for about 37% of economic activity. We explain that we have 8 primary habitat types on our offshore and mainland that provide ecosystem services to support human and biotic life. And we boast of having friendly, creative, qualified, and resilient people who contribute to Anguilla's flavor of entrepreneurship. These characteristics in isolation set the tone for incredible blue-green economy potential. But as with most pathways to sustainable development, nothing can be considered in isolation. Food security is an inextricable component of a complex, dynamic, and interlocking system of social, political, economic, technological, regulatory, and environmental considerations, which, when explored and unpacked, reveal one resounding fact. Our individual and shared perspectives about the relationship between nature and society, human and non-human systems, dictate our trajectory towards growth, sustainability, and resilience. In the case of food security, how we maneuver the process of food production is a direct result of what we consider the role of human and non-human actors to be. For the remainder of my presentation, I would like to explore how the Nature Society philosophy of anthropocentrism contributes to the 4 pillars of food security in Anguilla. Anthropocentrism is the belief that humans alone have intrinsic value and that natural resources exist just as means to human ends. This bias against natural resources is one of the reasons why we continue to struggle to meet the demand for food at all scales. We cannot separate how natural resources are used from the way potential users think about natural resources. Therefore, the availability of land, water, and other resources for food production depend on whether stakeholders recognize their value and therefore invest in their sustainable management. This might involve making important decisions like reserving arable land for food production and agriculture as opposed to using it to build commercial office spaces. It requires standing firm on the restoration and conservation of ecosystems so that they not only continue to provide us with food, water, and shelter, but so that they also have the capacity to support pollination, to control pollution, to control pests and diseases, and to mitigate flooding, all of which are essential for sustainable food production. If we constantly carry the value of natural resources in our minds, eventually it will reflect in our actions. We wouldn't be violently opposed to the establishment of marine protected areas that are effectively managed and regulated because we would know that this would help to replenish fish stocks, thereby securing the longevity of fisheries. We'd understand that natural resources require evidence-based management, which might occasionally take the form of prioritizing conservation over development, but knowing that this is not necessarily a threat to human survival. This bias that we have against natural resources is one of the reasons why we continue to struggle to close the gap between us and the food that we desire. Food production at a very basic level can be achieved entirely by natural systems alone. But because of population growth, development, and inadequate environmental management, we are putting more distance between where our food is produced and where it is consumed. And we are requiring our natural resources to exceed their carrying capacity. How can we say that we are prioritizing food security, but not be willing to equally prioritize environmental conservation? How can we complain about low soil productivity and limited water access when we continue to support the indiscriminate clearing of land? We don't stop to consider that flora and fauna can naturally enrich soil, nor do we seem to care that deforestation accelerates erosion and prevents infiltration. Instead, we continue to fill in our wetlands to make roads and other developments, and then we have to invest in expensive irrigation systems to provide water for agriculture in times of drought. The more we continue to exploit our natural resources, the more infrastructural and technological inputs that will be required to get these resources to produce what they are naturally capable of producing, making the food production process more expensive, more fragmented, and more unjust. This bias that we have against natural resources is the reason why we will continue to struggle to get access to safe and nutritious food. Some of the natural threats to food security in Anguilla include pollution, loss of critical habitats, and the introduction and spread of invasive non-native species. And while these threats are applicable across all 4 pillars of food security, it's incumbent upon us to understand that the quality of the natural resources that facilitate food production impact the quality of the food that we consume. Pollution of terrestrial environments by microplastics, heavy metals, and pesticides can easily be absorbed by soils. In the marine environment, pollutants concentrate in the fatty tissue of biodiversity, which are then transferred to each trophic level in the food chain in a process called bioaccumulation. The end result of this is food with high carcinogenic and infectious disease risk, which we are then exposed to when we consume it. So even if we are unwilling to acknowledge the intrinsic value of natural resources, what we do need to understand is that environmental degradation is a microcosm of social and economic ills in a country. This bias that we have against natural resources is the reason why our risk profile continues to intensify in response to global shocks and trends. We may have no control over the occurrence and frequency of natural disasters, pandemics, recessions, wars, conflicts, what have you. But we do have multiple opportunities to improve our capacity to endure, to recover from, and to build resilience against these threats. But if our approach is not centered on environmental sustainability, then we are essentially shooting ourselves in the foot. How can we know how to protect ourselves if we don't even understand what makes us vulnerable? How can the same systems that we have put in place to make up for limited productivity of natural resources are the same systems that we continue to exploit to support this growing population? And these are the very same systems that will collapse under external shocks. To make up for a lack of sustainable land management and a lack of investment in local food production, we have settled for importing over 80% of our food. In times of disaster, pandemic, and recessions, when our trade infrastructure is either damaged or disrupted, we are at risk. And when these external shocks hit us, our governments, with already high debt burdens, have to make the very difficult decision of which fundamental sector to prioritize. And in many cases, food security and environmental conservation may not compete against healthcare and education. This bias that we have against natural resources is the reason why food security very well may be an unattainable goal for us unless we change. What we think about the natural world is reflected in how we interact with it. It's revealed through what we prioritize and what we invest in. For so long, we've been making commitments to growth, sustainability, and resilience, but behind the scenes, we continue to manifest tragedy of the commons. A radical transformation of our minds is necessary, where every single person on earth understands that our relationship with the natural world is not hierarchical, it's interdependent, where we understand that we cannot reap what we have not sown, and ultimately, we cannot keep what we do not protect. Food security and the sustainability of the blue-green economy can only begin where anthropocentrism and environmental degradation end. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to all our presenters this evening. Let's get another hand for them, please. And our panelists this evening, Kathy Gums, a marine biologist and coastal resources management specialist, Trenton Roach, a crop production specialist, and Carencia Rouse, an environmental management specialist. I need to let you know, I did mention this earlier, that our premier is the ECCB Monetary Council member for Anguilla, and Mrs. Kathleen Rogers is the ECCB board member for Anguilla. Now, our lecture tonight is being streamed live on the following stations: Radio Anguilla, 95.5 FM, ABS Radio in Antigua and Barbuda, ZJB Radio Montserrat, they'll have a rebroadcast, Radio 100, Helen FM in St. Lucia is taking the feed as well, and NBC Radio 107.5, 90.7 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they'll be doing a rebroadcast. We're also hoping along the way that we would have entertained stations from Dominica and Grenada. And of course, you can view the lecture on the ECCB Connects Facebook page or the YouTube channel, also via In Anguilla page for listeners and viewers here in Anguilla. Now is the time, the favorite time. It will be open to you, members of the floor, to present whatever questions you might have to the panel. As I said, it comes through me, and then I'll direct it to the specialist who will take the questions. So the floor is now open for your questions, and we'll also entertain as well some online folks with any questions that they may have. I think we have that capability. Okay, so the floor is now open, so who'll be first? Sister Avankati, please. Can we have a microphone? I think we can. Test, 1, 2. Test. 1, 2. 1.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to congratulate all of our presenters on 3 excellent presentations. Thank you for sharing with us. I have a question perhaps for each of you. Should I just go one at a time or throw them all out?
Throw them all out.
Throw them all out.
We'll just pick them up.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, for Ms. Kathy Gomes, I have a question with regard to our keeping of records because, sorry, I know that, well, I should say I've learned from our elders that, and I grew up in North Hill, so Sandy Ground was pretty much in my backyard, that in a generation or 2 ago, the fish that were available were much closer in to the extent that people swimming in sandy ground used to swim among fish. Maybe not all the time, it could have been seasonal, but certainly I heard it often enough that I think it was very true. And I know that fishers go further out now to get some of the same catches. So are we keeping track, and if so, for how long? And are we certain, you know, that we are able to build on the economy, the fishing industry as it is? So that's not really a question, but just something I'm asking. Well, so that makes it a question. Okay, so that was one.
Kathy says you would like
Yeah.
to. Go ahead, Kathy. That's fine.
Is my mic on?
No, she's
Yes,
mic'd.
yes, yeah, I'm good. No, I
That's
have
okay.
a-
That, we will use that for the floor.
Thank you, Avon. That actually is something that me, myself, can speak to, and I think I'm a very young person. Growing up in Crocus Bay, the fish was plentiful. You saw it. You were able to see conch, there's starfish, lots of fish, very near shore. The people used to set pots not so far out. You didn't need a boat to go miles out and catch fish. In conversation with the fishers today, they are noting that they never had to go so far to get specifically conch and lobster. And now they have to go way further, and not only are they going further, they are setting more traps and catching less fish. So it causes concern as to what is happening. It may or may not necessarily be a case of overfishing. It may be anthropogenic stressors, things that are happening on the land that are affecting our nearshore coastal resources that are causing fish to maybe go further out, as well as it could be some overfishing to some extent. But these things have to be measured carefully. There's specific data collection processes that are necessary to see whether or not it is overfishing. We are collecting data, however, data collection is challenging, where we have fishers that are kind of, they are not trusting the system. They think that you're asking them questions and you're collecting data for maybe tax purposes or for whatever other purpose. So they are very, very hesitant to share data. And this is one of the reasons why we keep telling them sharing data is important. We want to look at historic trends. We need to see how things are going. And even ourselves, the collection of our data, going in the field ourselves and conducting our own research is also important. But we also need to match it with those people who are in the field every day, those people who are the experts in what they do. And those are the fishers. So we're working on that relationship.
All right. Your other question here, quickly.
Thanks for that. With regard, and this is for Mr. Roach, with regard to the plastic coverings, and Ms. Rose spoke to the microplastics, because that's something that I've been reading upon for some years now, and I don't know if the plastic that covers the fields, if that's plastic, toxic plastic, or if there's some way that is more environmentally friendly, or are we like poisoning ourselves to help ourselves?
Mr. Roach?
Thanks for the question, Albert. Over the past, I would say, 5 years, I've reduced the importation of the plastic cover. What I'm doing now is using the mulch ground cover, which is basically vinyl. that is much better as compared to the plastic mulch. The problem with the plastic mulch, if you use it, we usually do it for one season. But our farmers, they're my friends, what they used to do, after the growing season, they allow the fields to follow. The grass grow up in it. And then come September now, they're supposed to go in and take out the plastic before the grass grow. Come September, come to the department, and they pay to get it plowed. Now the tractor gonna go in, brush cut it, damage that plastic, and then you plow it. So there's lots of pieces leave in the ground. That's why the reason why I stopped bringing the plastic. Because they wasn't managing the plastic well then. Like we're supposed to do, after you finish growing, we have a machine to lift that plastic up, you know. The guys was just plain lazy, just allow the grass to go, leave it to follow, and then they come in September and wanted to plow. That was bad on our part because we never supposed to go in and plow that field. We're supposed to tell Bill, go clean the plastic up first. So for avoid all that, I'm stopped bringing plastic. I'm using the ground cover now. So you see a black covering, that's what we're using now. We're not using the plastic anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Please, it's your time. No question is a foolish question.
I have more.
Please use the opportunity. You have the specialists here. There'll be, yes? I see someone in the back and we'll come to your minister. Yes, go ahead, please. If you could use the microphone, please, so everyone can hear. Yes.
While we are on the topic of food security, we have to understand where we have to start in terms of educating our people. And at ALHCS, that's what we are trying to do with our students. And currently we have around 50 students in year 5 who are doing agricultural science. But where our problem is the resources are very expensive. And we try to work with the Department of Agriculture to assist us wherever necessary. But what we want to know is, can we form a partnership, like a serious partnership with the Agriculture Department? If it has to go through the government or wherever necessary, put something in place at Agriculture Department in terms of how they can assist Education Department in seeing that we run a very efficient production at the school farm, especially in the new year where we are moving to our new facility, where we can have, what we would really like to do is have a production where we can sustain ourselves. So we produce year after year, and then the profits that we get from that, we're able to put it back into production to a point where we can sustain ourselves. So we just want to know from Department of Natural Resources, how can we do that? How can we move forward to see something like that happen?
Thank you very much. Linkages and collaborations. Anyone? Trenton?
It's a good, it's not really a question, it's more of a collaboration, asking for collaboration. I could say over the years, we have done a lot with the schools in terms of helping them to get their garden going, and we provide them with the seedlings and even some technical assistance. What we find though in the schools is the willingness of the children to go in and assist the teachers and care for the crop, bring it to maturity. And that's where the children lack in. That's where the gap is. So we could do the technical part, but they have to still be committed to getting that plant growing, because it's not a one-day process. It's a process where you have to plant, you have to manage, you have to maintain, and then you harvest. So if they don't show that commitment to get it to that final stage, it's still difficult, because we could give them technical assistance we want. If the school don't show, and not saying the teacher don't do it, it's just getting the children to understand that we have to go in the ground. This is for our SBAs, and get it done. If they're going to show that, we're going to continue doing our part. But if there's a gap, we can't fill every gap.
All right, Minister, someone, you have another question quickly?
Yes.
Then we'll go to the Honorable Minister.
Just on the point that he made.
You can use the mic,
on the
please.
point that he made, while our students are very willing, we have a time constraint as well. We've been on the shift system for like 6 years. It's crazy. And to get the students to be there constantly is a battle. And we understand that because they have 6, 7, 8 more subjects to do, right? And what CXC also recommends is that we have a farm hand to assist teachers because we are stretched as well. So we have made proposal to have persons assist us for when the students are absent or in times when we teachers cannot be there because we are dealing with livestock and crops. And those are living beings, which has to be cared for 24/7 if you ask me. So we are stretched as teachers and our students are stretched as well. So we need much more assistance from our community. We need more assistance from our government. We need more assistance in terms of getting people at the farm to assist us. Okay? And that's just something else I want to put forward.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, Quincy Gomes-Marie, I saw you with your hands up. I recognize you. And please keep the questions coming. Please keep the questions coming. Yes, I see another hand going up. Ms. Rouse, I'll recognize you after. Yes, go ahead, Minister.
Just Quincy here tonight, and just speaking to 3 strangers who did a really good presentation. Recently, there's been a lot of conversation in the community about marine protected areas and the feeling that marine protected areas would result in a trade-off, as though we cannot have both economic activity and marine protected areas. So as experts and specialists, totally unfamiliar with what's going on in government, what would you say, how do we manage both the environment and the economy in a meaningful way, particularly as it relates to fisheries?
Marriage of the two.
Your concern is definitely something that I've been bombarded with questions from people in the community, especially fishers. And for several years, we've been asking with the Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Unit, have been asking fishers in the general community to look at it like this. The marine protected areas, marine parks are a source pool. They're small source pools. So these are small areas where the juvenile fish get to grow into adult fish. And then they go over into the bigger pool. And this spillover, there's a much larger area for you to use rather than those small source pools. For the marine parks, those protected areas are spaces, they're little nurseries. They're where the babies are kept. They're where the pregnant ladies, the fish, let's think on it that way. That is their sanctuary. That is their safe haven. And all you have to do is wait until the right time for them to go over to that larger source pool. Because you can't take everything. If you take everything, it's not sustainable. And the entire thing will crash. So you need that safe haven. You need somewhere as a safety net. And this is what, it's like let's say a bank or your piggy bank. That's where you're putting away some, and then you're using some. And we need to think on it that way for it to be sustainable.
All right, Ms. Rouse? Sorry. You wanted?
Yeah, I just wanted to...
Please. Yes,
I just wanted to add to what Kathy was explaining. I think in a situation like this, a trade-off would be necessary. If it is that we're saying to fishers that they can't fish in marine parks, we need to be able to tell them, but you can fish in this area, and therefore provide them with the resources to be able to fish in these other areas. So I understand that there are persons who get their livelihoods from fishing right there in the near shore, but if we are going to tell them, no, you can't do it for this period of time, we need to give them some other options. And I think it's important that we get together as stakeholders and determine what works best for our context in Anguilla, because context-based initiatives are what's important.
Yes, the other Ms. Rouse? I saw your hand going up. Please. If you can just get to the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Used to be.
All right, so I came here this evening because I have a special interest in food security. And one of the things that I want to bring to our attention is that for us to create food security and to strengthen with, we need to reduce our dependence on food imports, right? Now here's the problem, and I want to put this towards the panelists to see if you can offer some suggestions. I know that my sister mentioned the tragedy of the commons, and I thought it was really interesting because I have a little notepad here, and I was writing down some notes while you guys were presenting. And I don't want to come off as a negative Nancy, but I want to bring to your attention when we talk about food security, we need to think about our relationship with land here in Anguilla, right? On a national level, right, government can, as they said, they can put land aside for agriculture. And on an individual level, only persons who own land can really try to create food security. What about the many Anguillians who rent? What about all the land that we have that is unproductive because it's not being exploited? Land cannot be considered a resource if we have not found ways to exploit land. Land sitting in Anguilla, just harboring natural shrub, cannot be considered a resource. We are food insecure, and we need to start rethinking our relationship with land in order to create first and then further strengthen our food security by releasing land for food production. So I would like to put it out there to find out if there are any suggestions, any approaches that we can try to create and strengthen food security by rethinking our relationship with land.
And I know this will certainly generate some discussion.
This is like deep.
The land issue, this is deep. So please, any member of our panel?
Yeah, I can start.
I don't want to touch land.
Carencia?
No, but we have to touch it.
No. I could do some suggestions.
I honestly don't even know how to begin answering that question, but I'll just dive in. Land is one of the most important resources that we consider when we're talking about food security. And in Anguilla's context, we are at a disadvantage because Crown does not own most of the land. Most of the land is owned by private individuals. And we all here in this room and who are listening and watching know that land is a very
topic.
It's a contentious topic here in Anguilla because and the reason why is because there is an inherent lack of trust between individuals and government. And I don't mean government as a particular 5-year administration. I'm talking about government as an institution full of technical officers, full of people who are also stakeholders in this quest towards food security. In a situation like this, policy and public partnerships with the public-private partnerships would be essential. But again, it all comes back to all of the stakeholders on the table coming to a consensus and being able to agree on, you know what, we have so-and-so amount of land. This land is best put aside for this purpose. And even if it involves purchasing, we need to be able to make some type of trade-off in terms of what land is best used for what purpose. And that brings us back to the topic of sustainable land management. So again, it really comes back to public-private partnerships and a regulatory framework to support these initiatives.
Thank you so very much. Yes, Teach?
Good evening, everyone. I first want to express my appreciation for a very stimulating evening. I think I needed this, and I want to say thanks, and I want to ask for a round of applause for the presenters and moderators. Now, I was stimulated to such an extent that I have to sort out some of my thoughts, but I think that I'll be thinking about these presentations for quite a bit. And I know we wanted to bring more students here, but being at the intersection of sports day and midterm break, it was difficult. So that is maybe not a comment or a question, but I think we have to do more to get our young people to understand the importance of discussions such as these, because when we speak about sustainability, we're thinking about their future when most of us here would not be here anymore, and what we do influences what happens in the future. And one of the words that stuck out to me in one of the presentations was intergenerational wealth and the inability with current practices to achieve that. And I think I'll spend quite a bit of time thinking about that. And then, to me, even the way our topic is phrased and maybe some of our presentations, are we thinking more about our pockets than our stomachs, which is the here and now, rather than the future? That's something, I don't know if we can answer it now, but I'll be trying to figure that out. And then my question is, Do we have to be insular when we think about food security? Are we currently devising ways and means to have partnerships, trade partnerships with our nearer and further countries in the regions, our neighbors, because we know war is real, pandemics are real, our food is all imported. Does it have to come from far away, or can we do more closer to us?
Excellent question. Panel? Anyone? Trenton?
Well, the first part of the question is if we're doing now or the future, we'll be doing some of both. Because if we could pay and invest in the farmers of the day, the local farmers, we wouldn't be spending money and putting money in the big pharmaceutical companies. Because if you don't care your health now, you'll spend that money at a doctor or paying for medication. So you're doing both. If you could secure yourself now, you're securing a future for yourself and your future generation. And the one according to trade, we do have partnerships with our Caribbean islands, and that's why in my presentation I said if we could use what we have in terms of the plantain flour, the cassava flour, and stop depending on the wheat flour from farther fields. So if we could, because I think in the early 80s, the late LFS Burnham, he had bringing some policies in Guyana where we were trying to prevent the importation of some of these same things, the wheat flour, onions, garlic, barley. So he was telling them to use what you have, and he created cassava flour, so everybody get cassava bread, plantain flour. So those are the things that would have helped the nation back then. The thing is, it was kind of a radical introduction, and the policies was just so harsh that the people didn't accept it. He's dead and gone now. Now Trinidad, over 2 years ago, FAO working with Trinidad to produce breadfruit flour. So you imagine, we talking about 30-something, 40 years ago, Farmers Burnham saw this initiative, run with it, but the nation, because of its implementation policy, didn't accept it. But now we're going back right there. So the history is just repeating itself.
Indeed. Please.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make another comment. I am a bit apprehensive about the question of are we thinking about ourselves or are we thinking about our future? And it really comes back again to how we treat our natural resources. If it is that the center of blue-green economy requires alignment of economic growth with social protection and environmental conservation, we really need to get those three sectors, get a handle on them before we think of expanding the blue economy. Because if it is that we can't even get environmental conservation under control now, imagine when we start to increase economic activity as it relates to these natural resources, then we're even at a further loss. Additionally, I think that we need to become more willing to accept that in order for us to have a sustainable future, in order for us to achieve food security, we need to be willing to sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, I mean sacrifice our behavioral practices and our eating habits in particular. How is it that in Anguilla, almost every other Sunday, we're eating macaroni pie, scallop potato, rice and peas, shepherd's pie, surf and turf, everything on your plate. This is not how we used to eat back in the day, and it's not how we can continue to eat if you're wanting to get to food security. Because again, we need to think of the 4 pillars. Not only do we need to have food that's available, the food needs to be nutritious. And we need to find a way to align security with nutrition. And I think sacrifice is a big part of that.
Excellent answer.
Good evening, everyone. Just to piggyback on Karina's question. It's not more of a question but a comment, especially when it comes to like the food security in the land. I'm not gonna touch the land issue, but in terms of recommendation, if we're gonna think about food security, is it that we're thinking a large piece of acre of land, or is it that we want a kitchen garden that can sustain us with what we need? You can be sufficient with 3 pepper trees, 3 tomatoes, some herbs to get your condiments. So at the end of the day, when we think about food security, is it that we're thinking to get an acre of land, or we want a kitchen garden that can sustain us and our family? I mean, if you want to do surplus, so be it. But we still need to be mindful of the extent that we're looking at for our household. So I just wanted to give an idea. You can do your container garden, your tire garden. You don't need a big piece of acre. 4 or 5 pots, 4 or 5 tires. So yeah, that's a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Comments and questions? Yes, please. Yes.
Well, what I wanted to say isn't related to the question that this lady would have posed, but Miss Gums would have touched on. She mentioned something in the past how you were able to swim with fishes, and is much easier to find fish closer in to shore. And she got that information from her childhood and also fishermen, older fishermen. So I'm gonna ask this question, which is, are there any measures and laws that are actually enforced, that are in place to combat overfishing? And also, what do you believe is the reason why our fishermen have to go out so far to fish now compared to back then? And I was trying to answer this question for myself, and what came to mind for me is that it could be the increased activity of boats in certain areas. Like there's a lot of yachts and mega yachts and speedboats that are active during the peak tourist season and also the summer season. And so how does that relate to the seasons that the fish are active and the fishermen are active?
Thank you. Very good question. Kafi?
It's a good question. Trying to remember everything now.
Enforcement.
But you said enforcement.
Enforcement.
You said enforcement, and that was a key word. There are certain laws, rules, and regulations and policies in place. Enforcement, though, of those regulations, that is lacking in some instances, right? For example, there is input controls on mesh wire for fish pot. However, that is very, very hard to monitor because you have fishers putting pots out and you don't see them for years because they pull them up, take the fish, put them back, leave them there. So there's no way of us really knowing what is the size wire that they are using. But there's need for collaboration between fisheries and customs to start to enforce those regulations. And then stuff like size limits for some of the fisheries that would help curb any incidences of overfishing. We do not have any sort of quotas, but things like size restrictions, input restrictions, they can help alleviate any instances of, say, capturing juvenile fish, right? Things like boating, there's again need for stronger collaboration between agencies, the agencies that deals with cruising permits and monitoring the yachts and how they dispose of not just yachts, but the container vessels, the big boats that come in, how do they dispose of stuff like ballast water that can affect our nearshore fisheries. Spill, how the engines of these boats operate, maybe they're spilling fuel and oil, all these things that can affect our fisheries. There's a need for constant monitoring of these things. Coastal development and the need for us to not work in silos but work together with agencies like the Department of Physical Planning to ensure that when developments are happening along the coast, that they are not engaging in any practices that are destructive to our coastal resources. Because those are all things that can be affecting our nearshore fisheries. It's a barrage of things that can cause domino effects. We need to do more enforcement and more collaboration is necessary. And even the sharing of data as well, because those people who are out there in the field, they are seeing more than what we are seeing. And if we can put together what different people are seeing and what we are seeing, and based on our knowledge, and we can make conclusions and, of course, recommendations.
Karense, you want to add?
Yes. The topic of food security and the marine economy in Anguilla is much more nuanced than to be able to explore into ours. But our focus tonight was food security. We need to consider that the food economy deals with other.
Just need to They weren't hearing you, Carencia, so you might just want to repeat.
Is it on now? I was saying that the topic of food security and the blue-green economy in Angola is much more nuanced than we can be able to explore in just 2 hours. But while we're talking about food security, we need to consider that the blue-green economy deals with other sectors like maritime affairs, shipping, tourism, all of these other activities that may cause stress on our marine and terrestrial resources. So when we talk about if there are any existing policies or legislation that can govern this type of work, yes, there are. But if we want to expand the blue-green economy, we need to think of additional legislation that's more collaborative. And of course, a marine spatial plan so that we can understand what types of activities work best where and how we can make the most of what's available.
Thank you. Further questions? Comments?
Just one quick question. I'm aware, maybe 30, 35 years ago, there used to be a closed season on lobsters. Does that still happen? Has the legislation changed, or we just stopped enforcing?
I am actually not aware of any closed season on
You're that young,
lobsters. Possibly, but the legislation that we use is very old, older than the 35 years ago.
I remember based on the fact that my family, we operated the Mariners Hotel. I'm sure the minister here could remember those days. And there was a time when we just did not have lobster on the menu because it was closed. The season was closed.
Possibly. Maybe there were other policies that I'm unaware of.
Any further comments, questions? Yes, Dr. Harrigan, please.
Yes, good evening, and I would too like to congratulate all the panelists for their presentations. And so, food security in the blue-green economy, as I said, a lot of it is much more than can be covered in 2 hours. So my question to all of you, and maybe you can give examples of, in your work plans, because I think that transformation, right, it's the mindset is the most important thing. So in your work plans, do you have initiatives to roll out education, be it to the schools, be it to the communities, and so on? So I'd be keen to know that. Thank you.
Trenton, you'll start.
I would say yes. We have some data in the work plan that we need to get more out there, and also we need to use some of the social media and meet the younger persons in society, and let them know that we need to stop looking at the US as our example and start looking at Europe as our example. Europe has so many policies that they put in place to help with nutrition and health of the population that the US don't seem to use, but our social media comes out of the US. So we just we just go down the wrong road with our children in terms of what they look at and what they see. So if we could use another example or another looking forward, a mentor, we shouldn't use the US as our mentor because they just promote the wrong things. So if we could start using, no, I'm honest here. If we should use Europe, we'll be in a much better state. The US is just total garbage. It's true, because what they do, they monitor themselves and then they monitor you. But what goes for them don't goes for you. How could you have double standards in terms of how they promote our insecticides that we use? What they sell to us, they don't use for themselves. That's not good enough. So if you're going to ban something, it should be banned across the board. It shouldn't be banned just in certain states and certain areas. But then, so we just got to look at different ways of doing business. And if we continue to do how we're doing it, we're just going down the wrong road. And it's just hard facts. We're just going down the wrong road to keep doing it like the way it is. It's not business as usual anymore. For us to achieve any food security, we have to change the way we think. And we have to start from the younger generation. And we have to do it. We have to look in the mirror and say, we're going to do this. Put the policies in place and lead to that. It's going to affect us now, but it's going to help them later.
Kafi?
Yeah, just going back to 2019, 2020, when the big scare with COVID-19 started, and there was a lot of fear on where would our food come from, and there were issues with shipping and border closures, and we couldn't get food in. And at that point in time, I recognized that there was a big push by the government to prioritize food security. It could have been on the agenda before, but it was much stronger then when COVID-19 hit, where people recognized, the government recognized, look, we need to push the agricultural unit and the fisheries unit. And so based on that, and of course, prior plans of the Departments of Agriculture and Fisheries, the focus then turned a lot to food production and how we can get fishers and farmers to be utilizing their trade more. How can we get more fish landed? How can we get people farming more? And the introduction of more subsidies, there's a lot more interest in it. And just based on that alone, we had to design work plans based on that, whether or not some of the work plans may have been focused on data collection, but with the end result being production of food, food production. Even looking at the fisheries development plan and reworking the fisheries development plan. And then there's the bank task force, which was created, and a big part of the bank task force is, again, food production and sustainable food production. So within the work plans of agriculture and fisheries, there is a big push for the end results being food production and, of course, economic revenue, generating money.
Carencia, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, yes, public education and awareness is always attached to our programs, our projects, our plans. However, public education and awareness does not always directly lead to behavioral change. At some point, there needs to be an individual commitment to change, no matter how much you know, no matter how you got that information. Because I'm sure that there are a lot of us in this room who know people who have wonderful jobs, have access to good health care, but they still struggle to manage their non-communicable diseases. And that's because people are sometimes unwilling to sacrifice for the greater good, especially when it's a long-term good. As it relates to Kathy's point about the increased focus on food production, I would like to remind us that increased food production is not equal to sustainable food production, because you can increase what you're doing, but if it's not sustainable, then we are back to square one. We've probably taken a few steps back. So again, we need to always insert sustainability and conservation when necessary into everything that we do, because there's no way that we can continue living on this beautiful island if we don't learn how to protect our natural resources.
Thank you. We have one online question here for the panel. Do you believe that seaweed and salt harvesting could affect the fish stock and the proximity of the stock to land? If so, how and what can be done to accommodate these activities? A question from a Mr. John Archibald. Seaweed and salt harvesting, could this affect the fish stock and its proximity of the stock to land?
I think there are some bright ideas, and some of the countries in the region have actually been engaging in this, thinking on seaweed from the sargassum point of view, because I imagine that is the concern, because that's everybody's concern. So answering just based on sargassum. Some countries have been actually going out into the ocean and harvesting the seaweed there. In my opinion, I think that is very damning to fish, to the wildlife. However, harvesting the seaweed, once it washes up on shore, I don't have an issue with that, and I don't see that necessarily harming fish or reducing populations. Because when the sargassum is in the water, the fish actually love it. They love it because it forms a natural habitat, a refuge. Sometimes very few fish, they wash up in it when it comes ashore. But definitely harvesting it out in the ocean is bad, because when you do that, then you're capturing the juvenile fish and sometimes larger fish, turtles that that hide amongst the seaweed and feed there. Salt, I honestly cannot really answer that one about the salt.
Impact of the salt.
But impact of harvesting salt, I don't.
Salt harvesting.
Salt harvesting from the ocean, I don't think so, because it's natural evaporation and the sea ability to replenish salt, that should not affect the ocean anyway.
All right. My sister, please.
All right. Hi again. Just in case, for those who don't know, I work for the Department of Natural Resources, so you will see me chipping in every now and then. I feel it's important to mention when Dr. Harrigan asks about the work plan. We at the Department Agriculture Unit, we are currently undertaking a pilot project that deals with the Flex Farm system, which is basically a indoor hydroponic system, which was basically made to increase food feeding programs. So we are basically doing an understudy to see how effective and how efficient it is, not only to increase food production, but to see if it can sustainably increase food production. So we're looking at the amount of water that needs to be used, the electricity cost, and the natural environment. So that is something that we are undergoing, and we are showcasing to the students and the public. So I am inviting you to come over and check it out, answer any questions, and see if it's something you would be interested in. And the partnership as well. It's a partnership that we're doing, and I am happy to say that we are the first Caribbean island who have this particular system. So it's something that I personally am very proud of. And that is something, again, that, like I said, is something that we are educating the schools and the public. So hopefully you will hear much more about that. So that is something that we have in our work plan currently going as well.
Anyone else? Any further comments and questions? Response, please.
I just wanted to also comment on Isabel's point about the partnerships. This particular project with the Flex Farm, that was the result of something we've been working on since, I think, back in 2021, where we wrote a project together, and the aim was to find investors to support that work. And there are organizations out there whose sole purpose is to connect those who have it with those who need it. And those types of partnerships are what we need in order to get the sustainability and food security that we need.
And we are not straying. It's food security and the blue-green economy in Anguilla. Any further comments and questions? Please, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I want to echo the sentiment of Ms. Celestine and Dr. Harrigan here. This has been a most refreshing experience. I think that most of us take our situation in Anguilla for granted because we've been able to enjoy the wonderful environment, the blue-green economy, without even thinking about the economic ramifications of it. Most of us who grew up here can attest to the fact that we've shifted from a mainly subsistence farming kind of economy to a tourism-driven economy. So my question to you is, has much consideration been given to how we can partner with our stakeholders in the tourism industry to move our agenda forward?
Question? Tourism industry to move the agenda forward. Carencia, Trenton, Caffey. You first.
I'm not sure if any work has been done with the tourism industry in collaboration. But what I know, if we could have the tourists come and enjoy what we grow here, that's a better thing than to give them what they're used to in the U.S. So if we could incorporate what we do and what we have and put it on their table, if we could present it to them in a nice way, it would be much better for a package instead of giving them what they have. So it's important the food for them. It's not as the same as growing the food for them. So if you could put the emphasis on growing it and give it to them, it's much better as compared to bringing it in and giving it back to them.
Carencia?
Yes. In January, our ministry launched the Environmental Stewardship Program that gives tourism industries and other stakeholders that use our blue resources the opportunity to improve their practices and become sustainable and certified by the ministry. So that is one example of a really good partnership that we have with them moving forward. And I'm hoping, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm hoping to see a lot of participation with that program in the upcoming years. So yes, there are options for that type of partnership.
Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Kathy, before we go to an online question.
In my presentation, on one of the slides, I made mention to the restaurants and hotels being a preference market for fish. When you have the hotels and the larger restaurants closed, that's a time when you see the fishers by the market trying to sell fish. But once these hotels are closed, it leads to food insecurity where fish is concerned, where it is very hard. You can't even go in the supermarket sometimes and purchase fish. And some people need to be able to purchase or should be purchasing fresh fish for their dietary restrictions, for benefit of eating fish. And the way the hotels is concerned, where fishing is concerned, there are those very strong linkages. So sometimes it actually leaves the regular, population at a disadvantage. So that is something that we need to work on. And I think that one of the biggest things, a fish market and proper storage facilities would help to alleviate those issues.
All right, we have two online questions. The first one, we know that there is a diminished amount of bait, fry and sprats. In this case, what do you think about the introduction of Japanese bait as an imported diet? Maybe perhaps affect our fish quantity and quality. Is this an issue?
I'm not sure I totally understand that question. However, there are concerns that the local bait, fry, sprats have been diminished. And just conversation with some fishers, they blame it on overfishing of those nearshore fish. But I don't know how importation of Japanese bait, and fishers import Japanese bait to fish with. I don't know if they mean like to introduce it in our natural systems or what. A part of the aquaponics project that we recently launched, and the public will hear more about it soon, we want to introduce bait fish because we recognize that there are issues with the fishers being able to afford to purchase the Japanese bait because it's quite expensive. So to introduce alternative fish to these systems, and that fishers maybe can invest in aquaponics systems, grow their fish, grow their vegetables and fruit. And if they don't want to raise fish to consume, maybe they can raise fish for bait. And that could help alleviate those issues.
Okay, and here's another one. Can we say that adjustments in our diet and requirements to satisfy taste must be quickly adjusted? Question?
Yes.
Comment?
Yes.
I would say
yes.
Yes
Is the short answer.
Yes.
Yes is the short answer to that. I think we have issues with this hegemonic behavior in Anguilla where we feel like North American food is the food. And that is the thing. And not what we grow. What we grow isn't necessarily tasty. It's not, what people are going for more is the taste and not the nutritional value of it. And yes is the short answer there.
Yeah, question of going back to basics.
Yes,
Mr. Roach.
I could say that is for the whole Caribbean, not for Anguilla as a whole, because in the early 2000s we had tropical race 4 disease messing with our bananas farms throughout the Caribbean, and they've introduced a new variety, but it was never taken off because the taste is not as good as the Grandma Shell banana. So because it don't taste that good, it wasn't accepted by the general population. That's where taste preference comes in. So we still grappling with the same Grandma Shell bananas because they don't want to accept the taste.
Karencia?
I just wanted to go back to a point that I made in my presentation about how we have such creative people here in Anguilla. I think that we need to use that creativity to try to make different types of food taste the way we want it to taste. And in terms of that North American influence, I'm not sure if you are familiar with these reels on Instagram and Facebook where people literally sit down with plates of burgers and all types of food in front of them and they just eat and eat and eat. And we sit down and we think, you know what, this is just foolishness, but we don't understand the psychological impact that that's having on us, because then we want to go and replicate those types of videos and reels. So again, we need to use social media not only as something that we just consume without control, but we use it as inspiration to be more creative with what we eat. And I think that more vegetarian-based diets will help us to do that.
Thank you. Minister Hughes?
I would actually like to share something. So,
okay, go ahead. And I see Ms. Richardson.
Rouse,
behind
you would
us.
have highlighted this in your presentation, and you kind of just highlighted it again. So we all know that resistance to change is a big problem in our community, and you mentioned that people have to be committed to change if we want to see like the benefits that we're trying to put in place. So as an individual, I'm interested in guiding the minds of the younger and in fact our generations to the right places to promote innovative thinking. So this is for Ms. Gums again. You mentioned in your presentation a solution to food security is digital marketing and sales, and you would have highlighted that the part about Instagram Reels. And as a very young person who's not even an adult yet, I lived through and experienced these things. I'm on social media and I see the impact that it has on the people my age and their actions. So I want to know if you can elaborate. Oh, sorry. And I'm also interested in and training myself in digital marketing and those kind of skills. So could you elaborate on that being a solution and also highlight to me who can persons like me actually work with to help put this solution into effect?
Excellent. While I was preparing this presentation, and at that point where I listed innovative marketing and these things to look at food security, maybe changing the mindsets of people as well, I noticed, well, we think that we are informing people, the general public, young people, by putting ads on the radio about eating fish. We have some infomercials that run real quick, radio bites, about consuming local fish. Fish is good for you. But who's listening? You know, who the people who we really need to be getting to. I'm listening. I listen to the radio all the time. But people like you are on social media. That is where you are listening, correct? Right?
Yes, and I listen to the radio.
We should be turning to people like you who are well informed with all the social media platforms that people are locked into. You would know how to market these things, to capture the attention of young people, how to change mindsets. And so just then I thought, it dawned on me, I need to reach out to the social media personnel at our unit to create ads that are different, that are attractive, something maybe visual to try and change the mindset, to get people looking at food security, to consider those people who are food insecure on the island, to influence people to eat more local fruits and vegetables and consume fish. I know that they are children, when you give them stuff like tamans and pomsarettes and things, they don't know what this is because I'm eating oranges and apples. So these are things that we need to be promoting through social media platforms, through those ads on YouTube. So while you have your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old child watching, and there's an ad that pops up that introduces our local fruits, and sort of change the mindset, because they're actually parents who, it's easy, so they go in the shop and you buy the apple, you buy the orange, and you cut it up and you put it in the child bowl. rather than going on a tree and picking something. So these are things that we need to be marketing more. We need to market more local fish. And even the fishers and farmers have to play a part too in changing how they advertise and how they market their stuff. They need to do more of reaching out to the public and saying, hey, I am coming in at 2 o'clock and I have local fish, not putting it on Radio Anguilla and Class FM, but on social media, blasting it on social media so you know where you can go and get your fresh fish, where you can go and get your fresh fruits and vegetables. So we are both guilty on both sides, the government agencies and the fishers and farmers. We need to look at innovative ways to market, innovative ways to sell as well. Even the selling, just to expound on that a bit, even the sale of fish, fruits and vegetables. I am very hesitant to go by the market or one of the stalls where they're sometimes selling fresh local produce or even regional produce, because when I go there, I can't use my debit card to pay. And so we need to look at cashless apps to selling fish and vegetables, because young people and people now, older people as well, safety, convenience. I was listening to ECCB on the radio one time talking about Dcash, the Dcash app. So rolling out these things and getting our fishers and farmers who are traditional and they're looking for you to bring cash. Now they need to be selling stuff with credit card machines. When the local financial institutions here roll out Dcash, they need to make sure that they're on board as well. And they need to be reaching out to young people like Mr. Harrigan on how to market their produce, to get their produce to young people.
Thank you,
Very
Kathy.
good, very good.
I'll take Ms. Richardson and then you, Minister, please.
Thank you. Just a comment. I was glad when Dr. Harrigan raised the point about the curriculum in school. Let's face it, farming is not exactly a sexy career to have, you know. So the way it's being marketed, if you will, even to these younger people here, I've had people ask me straightforward, you been in the ground today? You know, I'm Anguillian, born Anguillian, so I knew exactly what they were talking about. But that is not the kind of appeal if we expect younger people, you know, to take up these careers. And I hate to differ slightly with my friend, Mr. Roach, because he might not come back to my farm. But First Lady Michelle Obama did a lot for farming when she was at the White House. She had school children to come in, doing gardens, reaping the produce that they planted, because kids tend to eat what they grow more than what's set before them. So those are good examples, I guess, we could emulate from other people. Also, a couple of years ago at my farm, I grew some lettuce called ruby red lettuce. And this woman in the valley argued with me that lettuce is supposed to be green. Ain't no way she's putting that in her mouth because it was red and lettuce is supposed to be green. So we have, you know, a bit of education to, you know, to do if we intend to attract, you know, younger people, you know, to have these skills as a career. And they can be a career if they're marketed to the younger people the right way. Because as they say to me out there all the time, you are here in this hot sun all the time? Not very sexy, but if you enjoy it, you know, those are just my comments.
Thank you so very much. Minister Hughes?
Thank you. This is, I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but in my former life, I was the purchase manager at one of the hotels, and one of the things that we had to wrestle with and actually ban was fishers who would fish juvenile lobster and crayfish, and especially those that were spawned with the eggs. And so when Simone mentioned tourism, it made me remember those experiences. And what are we doing? Because what we noticed happened is that those fishermen who were fishing for lobsters and crayfish with eggs started to wash the eggs off of and scraping them off to ensure that there were no visible trace of eggs on the lobster and crayfish. So it goes back to the question that Evan raised earlier about the seasonal aspect to it. There was a seasonal aspect to lobsters, crayfish, and turtles. Eventually we banned turtle farming altogether, turtle fishing altogether. And we can't go the route of banning lobster and crayfish, but how are we ensuring the correlation between the fishing and the restaurants and the hotels, that they are not accepting juvenile crayfish, they're not accepting juvenile lobsters with under a certain size or weight, and also accepting them with eggs or any traces of eggs, and also parrotfish. How do we get people to stop fishing parrotfish? Because it goes beyond education. Because just recently, we laid before the House the state of our beaches. And the state of our beaches is a direct result of not only natural occurrences, but man-made occurrences. And as much as we continue to speak about sand mining, we know an indiscriminate amount of sand mining continues to happen on the eastern side of the island in plain sight. A violation, we know who they are, but we fail to enforce. Just over this weekend, we saw the destruction of one of the dunes in Rendezvous Bay. In plain sight, we know who is doing it, we see it, but there's no enforcement. So how do we get the enforcement aspect of these things to come up to the legislative and regulatory framework?
Thank you. Kathy, you'll take that, or Currency?
Yeah, I can.
Currency.
Many questions to respond to. In terms of how do we address these behaviors that continue to impact our natural resources, as much as we'd like to say that people can respond to incentives, they also respond to disincentives. And we need to have a strong regulatory framework that prevents people from doing these practices. And most of the time, they're not exactly receptive, but there's no other option the way I see it. In terms of enforcement, we really do need a bit more resources in terms of human and financial resources to make sure that enforcement is not only practiced, but that is consistent and transparent. And that requires updating and probably reforming our legislative framework so that, so that what exists is collaborative. We can't just have isolated pieces of legislation. They all need to feed into one another. Secondly, it also requires a lot of monitoring and evaluation because conditions change, things change. We need to be able to track that change so that we can make evidence-based decisions. I wanted to go back to the comments about children and their role in helping us to achieve food security. Not only are children impressionable, but they are important agents of change. They are very good at convincing those around them to do certain things, even if you're just doing it to appease them. And that is why they are our target audience when it comes to changing our behavioral practices. So Mr. Ethan Harrigan, I advise you to come and volunteer for us at the Department of Natural Resources. We always have projects that we are hoping to get more participatory input from our young people. So please stop by at any time and we can see what we can collaborate on.
Thank you so very much. Minister Gums, we'll take a few more and then we'll get into the wrap-up mode.
So this is not really a question. I might have to run out before we're finished, but it's more of a recognition of the ECCB for centering a very timely topic for the region, but particularly in Anguilla, where we are at a crossroads of our development, and we're at a very critical juncture because the things that we are aspiring to, the comments that are being made here this evening, really tie into the work that we are doing in the ministry. I know that they're specialists tonight, but I can't unsee them. I know who they are, and I work with them on a regular basis, and Isabel. And it's also an opportunity for me to actually invite persons to not just have this conversation in this room, but participate in the conversations and the ongoing consultations that we will have because, like I said, we are at a very important part of our development on a national basis, and particularly with the signing and the joining of the Blue Belt, we are looking for more persons, like persons in this room, to give your contribution so that we can take the excitement in this room and really put it into something that's concrete for our national development, and not only in the blue economy, but also in the green economy. The project that Isabel was just mentioning found its origin in COP26 3 years ago. And from then, we built on that. It was a collaborative procedure. And now we're at the point where we have a partnership with Sony Entertainment. So, teacher, I know that you were mentioning about involving the students. This one would involve the students directly. And we'll be coming to the school with hydroponic systems so that they can learn about the sexy part of agriculture, which is the future, but also recognizing that the way we talk about it, the language we use around the blue and the green economy has a lot to do with how our young persons and other members of the community regard the blue and green economy. So when we talk negatively about fishermen and fisher folk, and we talk negatively about farmers, when you talk about them in front of your children, that child is then dissuaded from becoming that because they don't want to be described as such. So we have to be mindful of our language, realizing that language is the precursor to action. And if we speak truth and light and favorably about these kinds of economies, we will see a turn. And it's not only the government to do so, and I am doing my best to make it sexy. You know, I'm showing up to farms and heels, but it is a whole community approach. And I feel like we have a very strong team in this building to really mobilize the country and breathe energy into the things that we have been wanting to do for decades, and we have the ability to do. So I'm taking mental note of all the faces. If I start texting you and finding your number in random places, it's because I feel like you are just the kind of people that the ministry needs right now to build on and to contribute to Anguilla's development.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. Hand in the back, please. The microphone in the back. Yes, you're recognized. And I see another hand on this side. We'll take those last two. Yes.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening.
For those of you who may not know me, is it on?
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
For those of you who may not know me, my name is Sajid Khanna, and I'm the Speaker of the House of the Anguilla Youth Parliament. Just to add to what the teacher spoke about, she was speaking, majority of the presenters, the specialists, they mentioned about what we are doing for now and maybe for the next 5 years. But it is also important that we mention our future for like the next 20 years. How would things be? I mean, the specialists you yourselves may not always be here. You may, embark on different journeys. So just saying. So it is important that what we are doing now, we're talking about the food security with the blue and green economy. We need to ensure that we set a strong foundation in which when the youth come up, like myself and my fellow parliamentarian over here, we need to ensure that they can thrive in this avenue and it can be a successful one for Anguilla. Additionally, we speak about marketing, digital marketing, as it relates to youths. Reels are nice, reels are real nice, but the way that we promote it, I'm a youth, and I would not, technically read a wordy reel. So how you attract the youths and engage them, that is really important. And also, youths, when they see that we have conferences and we have consultations, it's not really reached out to many. And I know there are people in the community that, may have interest in these things and maybe want to voice that, but they're probably, timid. And hence why we have the youth parliament where we have certain youths that can be able to represent those youths that are behind the scenes. So my suggestion is that if we are to have open mics where we get youth to come out and actually say, how they are feeling about the situation, and Anguilla people, when it comes to their belly, they're gonna come. So I think that's a really great suggestion, but also thinking about the future is very important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's always good to hear from the youths. We have another young man on this side. Please.
Good night, everyone. My name is Devon Carter. I work at the Anguilla National Trust, where I am also the Dean of the National Youth Ambassador Corps. So I'm going to be asking two basic things, I guess, stating. Isabel mentioned earlier about personal gardens and, that being a way for you to, help sustain yourself as well. One of the projects that the Trust is doing in collaboration with the Department of Natural Resources Agriculture Unit is planting fruit trees and giving them out to the public for free. So some of the fruit trees that we have are pomegranate, cherry nut, passion fruit, sea grapes. So once they're ready, we'll send a notice out so you guys can come collect them. And all we ask for you to do is just leave us know where you guys are planting them. We also have flowering plants like lignum vitae, buttonwood mangroves, like those ones that you see trim in front of NCBA Bank. Like we have those plants as well. Like we are also giving out all totally free in order to help, so that they can have more plants. So all of this is part of our pollinator project. So we also have bee apiaries as well to help with farmers so that they can, pollinate their plants. So we are doing a lot of different pollinating projects as well in collaboration with the government. Also, for the National Youth Ambassador side, this is more for the youths in the room. We have an open mic on March 9th for youths, and this would be a collaboration with the Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Unit and the Anguilla National Trust, hosted by the National Youth Ambassador Corps. And our plan is to have youths to come in and talk about the marine parks and the marine park plan, which is in the process. So there is works happening for the marine parks, and we'd like to invite our youth here, youth listening, to be part of that. It should be at Maribel's at 6 p.m., March 9th.
All right, thank you so much for that. We are at the end, so we'll just ask our panelists, starting with Kathy, to give just a 30-second wrap-up. So we'll be hearing from each of the panelists, and then Wenika Romney from the ECCB agency office will be here to do the vote of thanks.
I want to just express my gratitude to the ECCB and Charmaine for involving us in this 40th anniversary lecture. I thought that it was very good because it brought such a vital topic to the attention of the region. And this isn't an issue that is unique to Anguilla, food security. It is an issue that is throughout the region. And I think that together, this is our opportunity to start the conversation and together come up with solutions for our entire region. So thank you to the ECCB for starting that conversation.
Thank you, Kathy. Trenton?
I want to share some of Kathy's sentiments as well. I thank the ECCB for this lecture, and I even thank Charmaine for choosing food security in the blue-green economy, because there's other lectures we could have chosen, but I just love this topic. And it actually starts off the conversation very well, given that we're in an environment where with war and COVID, just after the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's just a perfect start for this conversation.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Karencia Rouse.
I just have one sentence worth of food for thought for you. Food security, sustainability, climate mitigation, climate action, all of it starts in the mirror. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In the mirror, yes.
Look in the mirror, see yourself.
I love that. All right, I did say when Nika Romney would come to do the vote of thanks, but Charmaine Lynch Harrigan, the ECCB agency office manager, will do the vote of thanks. Thank you so very much.
Good evening, everyone. I too would like to adopt the protocol already established. Give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Psalms 118, verse 1. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. Romans 1, verse 8. On behalf of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, we extend our sincerest gratitude to our presenters, Ms. Kathy Gums, Ms. Carencia Rouse, and Mr. Trenton Roach, for your time, dedication, experience, and knowledge shared this evening on the food security and the blue-green economy. We also say a special thank you to our host and moderator, Mr. Keithstone Graves, for so ably carrying us through the program in such an organized manner. Thank you to Governor Antoine for his warm greetings and inspiring remarks. We express appreciation to Reverend Hodge for his powerful prayer. We are grateful to Titanium Sound for the excellent audiovisual and live streaming services. Thank you to the media and all our service providers. And to you, our most valuable audience in here and online, our heartfelt thanks for your presence and participation in making this ECCB's 40th anniversary lecture series, the Anguilla edition, a success. Thank you, and we now invite you to partake in our reception. Thank you.
My grandfather used to
Or move that. This is probably easier. I don't want to touch it.